Have you ever changed what you wore, what you said, or even what you dreamed just because of what someone else might think? Maybe you stayed quiet in a meeting when you had something important to say. Maybe you chose a job that looked good to others but felt wrong to you. Maybe you smiled and said, "I'm fine," when you were not fine at all. If any of that sounds familiar, you are not alone. There was a woman named Mia. She was 32 years old. She worked as a graphic designer and lived alone in a small apartment in the city. By most people's standards, Mia had a good life, a steady job, a clean home, a few close friends. But every morning getting dressed was a battle. She would put on an outfit, look in the mirror, and think, "What will they say?" She would change, then change again, then change once more. Some mornings she stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, trying on 4 different outfits before she walked out the door. Not because she didn't know what she liked. She knew exactly what she liked. But she was not dressing for herself. She was dressing for the imaginary audience in her head. The neighbors, the co-workers, the strangers on the bus who would glance at her for 2 seconds and forget her completely. Mia was living in a prison, and the prison had no walls, no locks, no guard. The prison was built entirely out of other people's opinions. Most of us live in that same prison. We just don't call it that. We call it being considerate, being professional, being normal. But somewhere underneath all of that, there is a voice that is always asking the same question: what will they think of me? Today, we are going to answer that question, once and for all. This lesson is for English learners who want a free and fearless mind. It is built on the wisdom of ancient philosophers who lived over 2,000 years ago. Men who faced war, slavery, exile, and empire, and who somehow, through all of it, never lost their inner peace. Their secret was not power. It was not money. It was not the approval of the crowd. Their secret was a single idea, so simple it sounds almost too easy. And yet most people spend their entire lives never understanding it. By the end of this lesson, you will understand it, and you will have real tools to start using it today. Their opinion is not your problem. That is the idea. That is the key to everything. 7 words that the Stoic philosophers lived by. 7 words that can change the way you walk into every room, every conversation, every decision in your life. If this is already landing somewhere inside, you subscribe right now. Because this is just the beginning. Lesson 1. Your brain was built for this. Before we talk about this Stoic skill, we need to understand something important. Something most people completely miss. The fear of judgment is not a flaw. It is not weakness. It is not something wrong with you. It is biology. Tens of thousands of years ago, your ancestors lived in small tribes. If the tribe rejected you, you died. Alone in the cold with no food and no protection. Belonging to the group was not a social preference. It was survival. So your brain developed a system, a constant scanner, always watching the faces of others, always reading signals. Are they smiling? Are they frowning? Do they approve of me? Do they still want me here? That system kept your ancestors alive. Here's what most people miss. The system is still running, inside you, right now. when you walk into a room, when you send a message and wait for a reply, when you say something and then immediately wonder, did that sound stupid? That is your ancient survival brain doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is not the system. The problem is that the system cannot tell the difference between a real threat and an imaginary one, between a stranger's cold glance on the street and a lion in the grass, between a coworker's raised eyebrow and being thrown out of the tribe forever. To your brain, they feel the same. Here's where it gets interesting. Every time someone approves of you, your brain releases a small reward, a little shot of good feeling. It says, good. They accept you. You're safe. And each time you seek that reward and receive it, your brain learns. It takes note. It says, do that again. Do more of that. Keep performing. Keep adjusting. Keep making them happy. Over time, without realizing it, you build a habit. Not a habit of being kind or thoughtful. A habit of needing approval to feel okay. A habit of measuring your worth by the reactions of others. Think about this. You did not choose this habit. You were not born with it fully formed. It grew quietly through years of small moments. A teacher who praised you in front of the class. A parent who only smiled when you behaved a certain way. A friend who laughed at something you wore. A comment online that made your stomach drop. Each one of those moments taught your brain the same lesson: other people's opinions matter. Other people's opinions determine your safety. Other people's opinions are real. And now, today, your brain still believes that, even when the facts say otherwise. But here's the thing about programs. You cannot always delete them, but you can choose not to run them. That is what this lesson is about. Not erasing the fear, not pretending it doesn't exist, but learning to see it clearly, to name it, and then to make a different choice. The ancient Stoics understood this better than almost anyone who has ever lived, and they left us a roadmap. Lesson 2. The invisible prison. Let me ask you something honest. How many decisions have you made, not because you wanted to, but because of what someone else might think? Maybe you studied a subject you didn't love because your family expected it. Maybe you stayed in a relationship long after it stopped working because you were afraid of what people would say if you left. Maybe you have a dream right now sitting quietly inside you that you have never told anyone because you already know how they will react. Think about this. You are not performing for one audience. You are performing for many. The parent in your head. The friend who always has an opinion. The strangers on social media who don't know your name. The neighbor who glances at your car when you park. The coworker who notices when you take a long lunch. All of them, simultaneously, every day. And here is the cost of that performance. There was a man named Daniel. He was 26 years old. He worked a regular office job during the day and wrote short stories at night. Writing was the thing he loved most in the world. The one place he felt fully alive. One evening at a family dinner, he mentioned it. Just a small mention. "I've been writing stories," he said. "I want to maybe publish something someday." The table went quiet for a moment. Then his uncle laughed. Not a mean laugh, just a small, dismissive one. "Stories?" his uncle said. Good luck making a living with that. And everyone moved on to the next topic. But Daniel didn't move on. He carried that laugh with him for 3 years. 3 years of writing less, of hiding his notebooks, of telling himself that maybe his uncle was right, of performing the role of the sensible, practical young man who had given up on something foolish. He didn't stop because writing was impossible. He stopped because he was afraid of that laugh, afraid of what it meant, afraid of what other people would think if he kept going and failed. Approval seekers collect opinions. Identity builders collect results. Daniel eventually did go back to writing. But think about what those 3 years cost him. Not money, not opportunities. Time. 3 years of his own life handed over to a single moment at a dinner table. The invisible prison has no walls, but the years it takes from you are real. And the hardest part is this: the people whose opinions we fear most are usually not thinking about us at all. Your uncle went home that night and forgot the conversation before he went to sleep. The coworker who raised an eyebrow at your idea moved on in 30 seconds. The stranger who saw your outfit on the bus never thought about you again. We spend our lives managing the reactions of people who are barely paying attention. You cannot please everyone and still be yourself. Pick one. The Stoics chose themselves, not out of selfishness, not out of arrogance, but out of a very clear understanding of something that most people never see. You only get one life, and it belongs to you. Lesson 3. The Stoic Divide. About 2,000 years ago, a man named Epictetus was born into slavery. He had no freedom of movement, no rights, no choices about where he lived or what he did with his days. At some point in his life, his master broke his leg deliberately as a demonstration of power. Epictetus reportedly looked up at his master calmly and said, "I told you that would break." Then he went on with his life. Now pause for 1 second. Here was a man with almost nothing. No money, no status, no physical freedom. And yet he became one of the most respected philosophers in all of history. Kings and emperors read his words. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman world, kept Epictetus's teachings close to him every single day. Why? What did Epictetus have that made him unbreakable? He had one idea, a single clear way of seeing the world that gave him a freedom no one could take away. He called it the dichotomy of control. It is this: everything in life falls into one of 2 categories. Things inside your control, and things outside your control. Inside your control, your thoughts, your choices, your effort, your values, your response to what happens to you. Outside your control, the weather, other people's actions, the opinions of strangers, the judgment of your family, the reactions of people online. That is it. 2 categories. Everything in the world fits into one of them. And here is the part that changes everything. Epictetus said that suffering, real suffering, does not come from bad things happening to you. It comes from caring deeply about the things in the second category, the things you cannot control. A prisoner asks, "What will they think?" A free person asks, "What do I think?" When you lie awake at night worrying about what someone said about you, you're spending energy on category 2. When you change your behavior to match what you imagine others expect, you're living inside category 2. When you feel your stomach tighten because of a comment, a look, a silence that lasted 1 second too long, you are giving your peace away to something that was never yours to control. And the reason is always the same. Their opinion is not your problem. It never was. Their opinion lives entirely in category 2. It always has. Now here is what makes this idea practical. Because the Stoics were never just about theory, they were about action. Take a real moment from your own life, a decision you are facing, a fear about what someone might think, a choice you have been avoiding. Ask yourself this simple question: is this in my control or is it not? If it is in your control, focus there. Put your energy there. That is where your power lives. If it is not in your control, then any energy you give it is energy stolen from your own life, from your own choices, from the things that actually belong to you. You control your choices. You do not control their conclusions. Epictetus lived by that, even in chains. Even with a broken leg, he was the freest man in the room because he understood exactly where his freedom began and ended. And so can you. Lesson 4. The approval loop. There is a pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It starts small. You want to say something, but you hold back. Because what if they don't like it? What if they judge you, so you stay quiet, and nothing bad happens? The room moves on, and your brain registers staying quiet kept me safe. So the next time you stay quiet a little faster, or maybe it goes the other way. You say something and someone laughs or nods or says, "That's a great point," and your brain lights up, that small warmth, that moment of belonging. And your brain registers speaking that way got me approved. So the next time you speak that way again, not because it's true, not because it's you, but because it worked. Hear me on this. Every time you change yourself for approval, you teach your brain that your real self is not enough. Every time you perform for the crowd, you practice the belief that the crowd's verdict matters. Seeking their validation reinforces the idea that you cannot feel okay without it. The loop tightens. The need grows. The real you gets quieter. Seneca, the Roman philosopher and writer, understood this deeply. He spent years as one of the most powerful advisors in Rome, surrounded by people whose approval could save or end a career, a reputation, a life. And yet, in his letters written late in his life, he kept returning to the same warning. He wrote to his friend Lucilius about the danger of living for the crowd, about how a person who tries to please everyone ends up belonging to no one, not even themselves. He described men of great talent who spent their entire lives performing, adjusting, shrinking, expanding, changing shape depending on who was watching. And he asked a simple question: when did they ever get to be themselves? The reactive person bends with every opinion. The rooted person stands through every storm. What made Seneca's warning so powerful was not the idea itself. It was the honesty. He admitted that he had fallen into the loop too, that even he, knowing all of this, had caught himself adjusting his words, his tone, his choices based on what he imagined others expected. That is how powerful the loop is. It catches wise men too. But knowing the loop exists is the first step out of it. Here is what that looks like in practice. The next time you are about to make a decision based on what someone else might think, stop for just 1 second. Ask yourself, is this what I want? Or is this what I think they want from me? Is this my voice, or is this the version of me I perform for others? You don't have to have the answer immediately. Just asking the question is enough to create a small gap between the loop and your next move. And in that gap, something important lives: your actual choice. Seeking approval teaches you that you need it. Choosing yourself instead teaches you that you don't. If this lesson is opening something in you, subscribe right now. There is more coming, and it gets deeper from here. Lesson 5. Build the inner citadel. Now think about this. If no one was watching, who would you be if your family could not see your choices? If your coworkers had no opinion about your career? If the people on social media never knew your name? If there were no one to impress, no one to disappoint, no one to explain yourself to? What would you wear? Where would you live? What work would you do? What would you say out loud that you currently only say in your head? Most people have never seriously asked themselves that question. Because the imaginary audience has been there for so long that it feels like part of the furniture, like something fixed and permanent, like the walls of the room itself. But it is not the room. It is just noise inside the room, and you can learn to hear through it. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. He commanded armies. He made decisions that affected millions of people. He was surrounded every single day by advisors, senators, generals, and crowds who watched his every move and had strong opinions about all of it. And yet, every night, he wrote in a private journal. A journal he never intended anyone to read. No audience, no performance, no editing for how it would look. In those pages, he questioned himself. He admitted his fears. He reminded himself of the things that actually mattered. He wrote about the smallness of fame, about how the people who had been celebrated before him were already forgotten, about how the opinions that had felt so urgent in the moment had dissolved like smoke. He called the protected space inside a person the inner citadel, a fortress of the self that no one else could enter. Not a king, not a crowd, not even the most powerful opinion in the room. 99 people spend their lives performing for an audience that isn't watching. One person lives. Marcus Aurelius was that one person. Not because he didn't care about the world. He cared deeply. But he knew the difference between caring about people and needing their approval, between engaging with opinions and being controlled by them. He understood completely that their opinion is not your problem. Building your own inner citadel looks like this in practice. It starts with knowing what you actually believe, not what you were told to believe, not what makes people comfortable. What you, after thinking carefully and honestly, actually think is true and good and worth doing. Write it down if you need to. The values that are truly yours. The things you would stand by even if no one agreed with you. The person you would choose to be if the only witness was yourself. Because here is the truth. The people who move through life with the most ease, the most confidence, the most genuine connection to others are not the ones who have figured out how to please everyone. They are the ones who stopped trying, not because they became cold, not because they stopped caring about people, but because they found something more stable than approval to stand on. An unshakable identity is the only armor you ever need. And that armor is built quietly, in private, one honest choice at a time. Lesson 6. The dead man question. Let me make this simple. Think of someone whose opinion you are afraid of right now. A real person. Someone whose reaction to your choices keeps you up at night. Someone whose approval you have been quietly chasing for months, maybe years. Picture their face. Now ask yourself this: 10 years from now, will this person remember this moment? Will they remember what you wore, what you chose, what you said or didn't say? Will they remember the decision you made or didn't make because of what they might think? In most cases, the answer is no. They won't remember next week. Now go further. 50 years from now, will anyone alive even know this person's name? Will anyone remember their opinions, their judgments, their verdict on your life? And 100 years from now, Marcus Aurelius wrote about this again and again in his private journal. He would remind himself that the great emperors before him, men who had commanded empires whose names had been carved into stone, whose faces had been put on coins, were now completely forgotten. The crowds who had cheered for them were gone. The critics who had torn them apart were gone. The opinions that had felt so enormous and so permanent had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. He wasn't being dark, he was being free. Because when you truly understand that the opinion which is frightening you right now will not survive a single generation, something loosens inside you. The grip relaxes. The weight you have been carrying starts to feel a little lighter. A weak self changes its clothes for strangers. A strong self dresses for no one but itself. Eleanor Roosevelt, who lived through decades of public life and endured more criticism than most people will ever face, said something that has stayed with people long after her time. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That word, consent, you have been consenting. When you shrink, when you change your answer to match the room, when you swallow something true because the moment feels too risky, you have been handing over your consent quietly to people who will not remember you gave it. Now think about the other side of this. The things that last are not the opinions of others. They are the choices you made when no one was watching, the work you did when no one was applauding, the person you chose to be in the small, private moments that added up one by one into a life. 100 years from now, no one will remember what your coworker thought about your presentation. But the courage you practiced in that moment, the choice you made to speak anyway, that became part of who you are, that stayed. The people whose opinions scare you will be forgotten, and so will their opinions. This is not a sad idea. It is the most freeing idea in the world, because it means that the only verdict that has any real staying power is the one you give yourself. The only judgment that will follow you through your entire life is the one you make about who you are choosing to be. That judgment belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. Lesson 7. The last opinion that matters. Stay with me, because this is where everything comes together. You now understand why your brain fears judgment. You see the invisible prison that other people's opinions can build around a life. You know the Stoic divide between what is yours to control and what is not. You see the approval loop and how it tightens over time. You know the inner citadel and how to start building it. And you know that the opinions frightening you today will not survive a generation. Now there is one more thing, the most important thing. Whose opinion actually matters, not theirs. Not the neighbors, not the co-workers, not the stranger online who spent 40 seconds reading something about your life and decided they knew exactly what you should do differently. Not theirs. Not theirs, yours. Epictetus, the man born into slavery who became one of history's greatest teachers of freedom, said something that has echoed across 2,000 years for a reason. No one can hurt you without your permission. Read that again slowly. No one can hurt you without your permission. What he meant was not that pain doesn't exist. It does. What he meant was that the deepest kind of damage, the kind that shrinks a life, the kind that makes a person smaller than they were meant to be, that kind cannot reach you unless you open the door. And the door opens when you hand your self-worth to someone else to hold. Here is what modern psychology calls cognitive diffusion. It is a simple technique, and it works. The next time you catch yourself spiraling into what someone might think of you, instead of saying, "They think I am a failure," try saying this: "I notice I am having the thought that they think I am a failure." One small shift, one small distance between you and the thought, because the thought is not you. The fear is not you. The imagined judgment of a person who may not even be thinking about you right now is certainly not you. You are the one who notices the thought. You are the one who decides what to do next. That is the part of you that is always free. The Stoics built their entire philosophy around this one insight, that between what happens to you and how you respond there is a space, and in that space lives your freedom, your character, your life. Most people never find that space. They react before they even know a reaction is happening. They hand their peace away before they realize they were holding it. But you are finding it now. And once you find it, you will know this with absolute certainty. Their opinion is not your problem. Not as a wish, not as a hope, as a fact. As something you are choosing to understand deeply today. Because here is the last truth of this lesson. The world will always have opinions. There will always be someone watching, always someone ready with a verdict. That will never change. What can change is this: how much of your one life you give to those opinions. How many mornings you spend changing outfits for an imaginary audience. How many dreams you keep quiet because of a laugh you heard at a dinner table years ago. You were not born to perform for strangers. You were born to live. 7 lessons. Let's bring them home. Your brain was built to fear judgment. That fear kept your ancestors alive. But you are not running from lions anymore. You are running from imaginary audiences who are barely paying attention. That invisible prison is real. But the walls are made of other people's opinions, and opinions are not stone. They are smoke. They dissolve. They leave no mark on anything that truly lasts. The Stoic divide is the tool that changes everything. Two categories: inside your control and outside your control. Their opinion lives entirely in the second category. It always has. Give your energy to the first. The approval loop tightens every time you feed it, and it loosens every time you choose yourself instead. One small choice at a time, you teach your brain a new lesson. Your real self is enough. The inner citadel is yours to build. Start with knowing what you actually believe. Write it down. Stand on it. Not loudly, not for anyone else to see. Quietly, privately, one honest decision at a time. The dead man question cuts through everything. The opinion that is frightening you today will not survive a generation. The courage you practice today will shape the rest of your life. Choose accordingly. And the last opinion that matters is yours. Not theirs. Not theirs. Yours. That inner freedom cannot be taken without your permission. And now you know exactly what that means. Their opinion is not your problem. It never was. It never will be. This life belongs to you, not to strangers, not to the crowd. You were not born to perform. You were born to live, to think your own thoughts, make your own choices, and build something that, when you look back on it, feels fully, honestly, completely yours. The ancient Stoics figured this out in a world far harder than ours. Marcus Aurelius figured it out while running an empire. Epictetus figured it out while living in chains. Seneca figured it out surrounded by people whose approval could end his life. If they could find this freedom, then you can find it now. Keep coming back. Keep listening. This is how English learners grow, and it is how free people are made. What is one thing you stopped doing because of what others might think? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this lesson meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it. Someone who is living a little too quietly. Someone who is performing when they could be living. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next lesson.